Good day. Today we'll be providing a technical overview of our FortiVoice business communication solution. If you are already familiar with our other Fortinet products, then you will find the management interface quite recognizable. So let's begin. We're looking here at the management interface, which will be the same whether you're using an appliance or a VM. This also applies if you're using FortiVoice in AWS or Azure. The dashboard that we're looking at here consists of several widgets. The one that's really important would be the licensing information. So here is where we can upload the add-on licenses to support Hotel PMS, Call Center, and the soft client. The soft client is what will allow you to support the mobile apps and the desktop clients. Moving into the phone system settings, under the audio prompt section, this is the area here where you're able to upload audio files for music on hold. It's also the same area where you would be able to create your announcements and greetings for the auto attendant. So those are the messages that people will hear when they first call in. So again, you have the option to upload a WAV file, or you can click on record and choose an extension that will create the manual recording. So if you choose the extension and hit send, it rings that individual's phone, they pick up and follow the prompts to generate the recording. Once the recording is done, then as the admin, you would have the ability to initiate the playback and even download that as a backup file. For music on hold, once you've uploaded all of your audio files, you can then break those up into music on hold profiles. So this is something that you can create for different departments or user groups. You just simply choose your audio files and move them from the left to the right, which then you can play them in sequential or random order. The other option that you have available to you is the ability to stream from an MP3 URL. Moving on to the profiles, there's various profiles here that are used as part of the initial setup. The first one we're touching on would be the SIP profiles. So there's already default ones that are available. Typically, you don't need to create a new one, as these ones will suffice, as we have ones that cover the physical handsets, the mobile app, the SIP trunks, as well as the video phone. They all have the same parameters. It's just what's been enabled. In this case, for the video phone, not only do we have the audio codecs G711 and G7829 activated, but we also have the video codecs enabled as well. Programmable key profiles are something that we do have default ones available, but this is an area here where you may need to create new ones for different user groups or departments. This is what outlines, I'm just going to bring up a different one here. This is the area here where you're able to configure one-touch feature keys. And there's two modes available, one for the admin and one for the user. So the admin mode, as the administrator, you are responsible for the programming of these different feature keys. So as you can see, the different features that are available would be like intercom paging, where you're able to page to a different extension, where the speakerphone then goes off hook and you can have a two-way conversation. There's extension appearance, where you're then able to see the status of different extensions that you've selected. So we could see a couple that are set there. So you could see if those users are on a call or not. There's the option to record calls as well. So this would be associated with a privilege that would have to be enforced in order to support this. The user mode basically we are giving those privileges to configure the programmable keys to the user, which they would have to configure through the web-based user portal, which I'll show later on. The next one would be the user privilege profiles. So this is another area here where you would create different profiles, again, for different user groups or departments. This is essentially your class of service, where you are dictating who's authorized or who's restricted from accessing certain features. So things like the web-based operator console, which could be opened up to everybody or to selected users. This essentially could replace a traditional receptionist phone. It is web-based, So they'll have widgets where they'll be able to see the calls that are coming in. They could do a drag and drop to somebody in the directory, and have action icons to place calls on hold or engage in call parking or initiate a new call, do a blind or screen transfer, and so forth. You also are able to set call restrictions. So you can dictate who's allowed to make certain call types, whether it's long distance, local calls, or even international calls. So taking a look at long distance, that's something that could be allowed openly, or we can enforce a global account code that the user would have to enter in before the system processes the call. Or this could be a personal code that as the admin you can generate at the extension level. So that essentially this would be a unique code for every user. Other features that are available would be personal recording. This essentially is ad hoc recording that could be initiated by the user, which that's where that record one-touch feature key would come into play. So they just simply press the button to begin the recording of their personal calls. Another feature available would be the call barge feature, interrupting calls in progress. So there's 3 options that would be available to either overhear the conversation that's taking place. This could be used for coaching or training purposes, or just simply the ability to just relay information to the user without overhearing the conversation. Hot desking is also available, which is also known as free seating. This is a feature that would take place and which could be applied for individuals or users that may have different work schedules, but they're sharing a desk and phone. So in that situation, what they would do is they would log into the phone using a key code and then their extension credentials, and then the phone will boot up with their extension information, which would include their extension number, display name. It also would be linked to their personal mailbox, as well as the personal call handling settings. And the other one would be like the user portal. So this would be access to the web-based user portal, where then we can control also what they're allowed to see here. So moving into that, that's what I'll jump into next. So this is the user portal here. So if we go back to the administrative portal, you'll see that the URL is a /admin. For the user portal, it will be /voice, and then they can log in with their extension, local authentication information, which would be their extension number and webmail code, or this could be their LDAP credentials. We can interface with like LDAP to utilize Active Directory as an example. So looking at the user portal here, everything is exposed in this demonstration. So the user could have access to this to review their own personal call history. So it's basically just CDR records. They can download this entire thing as a CSV file. They could double click on any one of the entries here to view call information, detail information, as well as the visibility to see the call flow from beginning to end. So in this example here, the call came into the extension 3012. There was no answer. So as a result, it followed the call handling no answer state, which is predefined to route to their personal mailbox. And we can see that a message was left in their mailbox. So very easy to read, very legible. They also have visibility for voicemail. So with any personal mailbox, voicemail to email notification is available with FortiVoice. This would just be another method for them to access the voicemail messages. So they can initiate a playback, and then they have actions here to delete, forward it to somebody else, or even download it as a backup file. Under contacts, they'll have access to the company directory. They'll have also the ability to create their own personal contact list, as well as create a personal block list. So any numbers, phone numbers that they enter in here would no longer be able to reach them directly at their extension. So there's call handling that could be put in place to basically hang up on that, on those block numbers. There's also a business contact listing that is available and managed from the administrator. So this would be a global business contact that everyone would have access to. And for the call recording privilege, so if that's been given and they're allowed to record personal calls, then they would need access to this user portal in order to review those personal calls. So they can, again, initiate a playback, and then they have actions to delete, forward it to somebody else, or even download it. Moving back to the profiles, there's the emergency zone profiles that are also available. So these are profiles that you could generate for different sites, locations, different user groups, or it could be based on like different floors. The intent for the emergency zone profile is that once we apply it to an extension, if that extension were to dial 911, then based on this emergency zone profile, we would deliver the caller ID to the PSAP that's been defined here. Then the PSAP, they receive that caller ID, they determine the physical address to then relay emergency personnel. Internally, what FortiVoice can also do is deliver an internal email notification to alert those individuals or individual of the extension. They'll receive that email notification where within the body of the email, they'll see the extension that dialed 911, the name of the profile, so they'll know where they're situated, along with the contact information if that's been populated as well. Other ways how we could deliver emergency alerts would be with our message group feature, where once that emergency has taken place, someone could trigger the message group, and depending on how it's been set up, we could deliver a text message that would be displayed on the phones of a select user group. So this could be administration or management. And these caller ID, these variables that are shown here is based on that emergency zone profile. Another method that could be added as well would be to deliver a predefined audio message that would be broadcasted out to a specific multicast group. So a multicast group just allows us to deliver an announcement or message to a larger group of endpoints, or this could be routed out to a single number like 911 or the phone number of the police department, as an example. If there is a need for geolocation information to be delivered to the PSAP, then we can interface with third-party 911 vendors like West 911 that support that specific feature set. All right, let me just see here. And just under the profiles here, scheduling. So this is just your standard scheduling or where the scheduling profiles are natively, where they natively reside. So we have standard schedules where you can dictate the days of the week, your AM, PM schedule. There's also where you could apply your holidays as well. There is a calendar mode that's available as well, where this provides you much more flexibility, where you can specify the recurrence of a schedule. And then these schedules will populate throughout the configuration based on what you're setting up, like the call handling or the dial plan rules. Moving into the extensions. So the extensions can be set up manually, or we recommend importing a CSV file. So the CSV file would contain critical elements like the extension number, display name, the phone model, MAC address of the phone, along with the various profiles that I've touched on. Once that's populated, then we can import that into the system. And so then the last step would be connecting the phones onto the network. So what occurs then is upon boot up, the phone will get an IP address from the DHCP server. It will pull the configuration from the system. So that would be done through using DHCP option 66. And that auto provisioning, the protocol used to support that would be HTTPS. So we've moved away from TFTP. And then the last step for the handset would be to go through the registration process where we're looking for the red icon to turn to green. And if we mouse over, we can then see when it registered and when it's going to expire. So that's done at 60-minute intervals, which is standard with all PBX vendors. Moving into the extension settings, the settings are broken up between device settings and user settings. Under device settings, we have 3 tabs: the desktop phone, the soft phone, and auxiliary device. So the desktop phone would be the registered physical handset, which in this case here is a FortiVoice 475 model. We could also see the firmware that's on that phone, so we could determine if the handsets need to be updated or not. Under the soft phone tab, so this is the one piece here because this is associated to the soft clients. So as I was showing earlier from the dashboard, this is the one piece that is an add-on license. So this is not something that's built into the FortiVoice solution. So once the licenses are added into the system, then we can allocate the number of licenses we want to apply for a specific extension. So we can allocate up to 3 different 3 licenses to one extension. And in doing so, then we can either set up a mobile soft client or a desktop client. So in this case here, because we have 2 licenses allocated, this particular user can use both simultaneously. If we set it to 1, they can either use one or the other. With the mobile soft clients, there is a QR code which the administrator can send out by email. Or if the user has access to the user portal and has the privileges, they have the ability to access that QR code from their extension preferences, which then they can scan from that mobile app. And the mobile app is supported for both iOS and Android. For the desktop client, excuse me, that would be a matter of configuring the account credentials manually. And the desktop client is available for Windows and Mac. And just to show you what that desktop client looks like, oh, just give me a second here. Let me just restart that. There we go. So they would just input the account information in here, and then we're looking for that to register. Once it's registered, then they have preferences where they can enable, disable, do not disturb, the same thing for call forwarding. They also can expand this to access their personal call history, as well as access their contacts, as I was showing in the user portal, so very similar, and access to listen to the voicemail messages and apply any specific actions. Auxiliary device basically allows you to add another endpoint to fall under the same extension umbrella. This particular feature is something that would be used for individuals who may be working at the office and sometimes they're working from home. So we can give them like another physical handset so that, you know, any calls that come into their extension would ring all of those endpoints simultaneously. And that can also include the soft clients as well. Looking down below under the user settings, so this is where those profiles can be added in here. The web access by default set for local authentication, but this is where you can switch over to LDAP. and utilize that LDAP password to access the user portal as an example. And then the phone access would be like the default voicemail password, which would then be modified by the user. So once the phone is registered, they just simply hit the voicemail button on the FortiPhone, and that will walk them through the mailbox setup to change from the standard greeting to a custom greeting and change the default password to a new password. And looking at the extension preferences, there's two areas here that I just want to touch on, would be the notification options. So as part of the CSV file, we can include the email address to support voicemail to email notification. And the voicemail by default, the voicemail setting by default is already predefined to include the voicemail as a WAV file attachment to the body of the email. And within the body of the email, they'll have action links to save or delete the message. So whichever action they choose, that will be mirrored onto the FortiVoice system. And moving down below would be the call handling for the extensions. So depending on the extension states, we can apply specific call handling. Now the majority of these are already predefined to route to the personal mailbox, but this is something that we can switch over to user defined, where we can apply a different action. So we can engage like follow me or call forwarding as an example. And these actions could be based on a specific schedule. The other thing that's also available with the call handling of the extension is the ability to apply an action based on where the call is stemming from. So we deal with a lot of SLED accounts, like school districts, where, as an example, for the teachers, since they have a phone in their classrooms, they don't want parents to be able to reach them during school hours. So we can set it up, during school hours, any calls coming in the trunk to automatically route to their mailbox. So that way they're not interrupting classes that are in session. One thing I just want to point out is if the phones were added into the FortiVoice system without generating the extensions, then what will happen is that the system will push an unassigned profile to the handset as part of the auto provisioning. So that's a default parameter that's enabled. In that situation, what will happen is those unassigned phones will appear under the monitor section. And then if you choose extension and devices, desktop FortiPhone, they will show up here where the management is showing not assigned. So in that situation, you would then select that MAC address of the phone, and under the action, you would have then the ability to assign it to a new extension or assign it to an existing extension if the second step was uploading that CSV file. Now we do have the ability as well that if those phones came up as not assigned, and then as a second step you uploaded the CSV file, there are key codes that you can implement to assign the extension, dial the key code to assign a certain extension to that physical handset. So there's the two commands that are available here. So that's something that can be set by the admin or by the user. Next I'll touch on are the feature groups. So the user group is what you would set up first to just easily categorize all of your extensions. So once you've done that, then it's just easier to apply them to the various feature groups. So I've already touched on the message group and the multicast page group. We do support a ring group, sometimes known as a hunt group. So that allows you to ring multiple extensions simultaneously or in sequential order. With the ring groups, we also can include external phone numbers as well. And similar to the extension call handling, it does come with its own dedicated parameters. The page group is similar to the multicast group, but this would be something that would be utilized for a smaller subset of endpoints to broadcast an announcement. So this could be used for specific departments or specific user groups, where then we would just choose the extensions, move them over from the left to the right. So any, actually, let me just open up the one that's here. So for example, this one's set for administration. So anyone that's associated to that administration group can would receive that page via the speakerphone if somebody were to dial, in this case, page group 6000. And as you can see, there are emergency call options that are available where we could choose to disconnect any calls in progress within that admin group to ensure that they're receiving the page. There's also the pickup group feature, which is something that would be of importance for businesses where they can't, they need all answers to be, they need all calls to be answered, even if someone is not at their desk. So with the call pickup feature, we would just specify the members of that pickup group, and then out of those members, specify who's authorized to engage in the call pickup. So in this case, this is a sales group that was created. So out of these 3 extensions, extension 312 is the one that is able to answer the calls from their handset if any calls come into extension 3010 or 3011. Now, I mentioned that when you create extensions, that each extension will have its own personal mailbox available to them. We also do support general mailboxes that could be used for different user groups or departments. And the general mailbox do support the voicemail to email notification as well. Moving on to the call features, auto attendants are the messages that people hear when they call in. So you would specify your predefined recorded audio file that you would have generated, and then it would just be a matter of configuring your caller options. So this will obviously coincide with what you've stated in your greeting. So just simply choose the key and then the appropriate actions. So we do have an option for the lookup name directory where we could search by first name or last name or both. Also the option to branch out to different auto attendants, which is great for different departments where they may want their own custom greeting with their own custom color options. Conference bridge accounts is something that's also available with FortiVoice, so there's no added license for this whatsoever. So we have conference bridge accounts that can be managed by the administrator. So the administrator will be responsible for creating these conference bridge accounts for select departments or user groups. This could something that could be set up statically, or this could be set up as a dynamic conference, which allows you to create different calendar events. So in this case here, this would be like a team call, and the system can randomly generate the conference ID and the PIN codes. You could specify the reoccurrence of that particular meeting, and then it would be a matter of just adding the email addresses of the attendees. So once this is generated, then the system will deliver a conference email notification, where upon receipt, that's something then that the recipient would be able to add to their Outlook calendar or Google Calendar, for example, and they can accept or reject that invite. So currently, right now, this is not interfacing completely into like Outlook or Office 365. There are user conferences that are available as well. Now, the number of user conferences does vary based on the system model. So there is a FortiVoice phone system capacities data sheet that's available from the Fortinet.com website, which I'll show afterwards. So I believe the max, it ranges from 5 up to 10 or 15, if I recall correctly. So this is not something that would be given to everybody on the system, but select individuals. So whichever extension that you've selected, then basically they would have the ability to manage the conferences themselves through the user portal. So they would have this calendar option here and would choose conference, and very similar to what I was showing earlier, they would be able to create that conference event. As you can see, the system randomly generates the conference ID and the PIN codes for participants and moderators. And then they would just simply add the email addresses of the attendees for that email notification to go out. Moving on to call recording. So FortiVoice has a full-fledged call recording solution. So I already touched on the personal or ad hoc call recording that's available at the extension level. So that would have to be given as a privilege. As the administrator, you could set up call recording policies. So with the call recording policies, you can record calls based on phone number, department, user group, trunk type, or even call queue. In this example here, I have a record all policy to record all incoming and outgoing calls based on this specific number patterns. I have other policies in place to record any calls if 911 has been dialed, even a internal recording policy to record extensions if any extensions, any 4-digit extensions starting with 3 have been initiated. But as I was showing, you know, this could be for call queues, different departments, even based on trunk type. And one thing before I move on is those recordings are all stored onto FortiVoice. We do have the capability to extend the local hard disk by interfacing with an external NAS server if needed. But for the call recordings, we also could push those off to a remote FTP or SFTP server. Moving on to the fax feature. So fax is something that is available with FortiVoice. So it has a built-in T38 fax server. So we could use FortiVoice to process incoming and outgoing faxes. It would be just a matter of creating a fax account, specifying the trunk profile and the fax DID, and then choosing a fax monitor. So if you choose a fax monitor, then this extension would be able to monitor those faxes through the user portal. So in the drop-down list, they choose monitor, and then they have access to that, the account that they're associated with. So any faxes that they would receive would show up in here. They would have the ability to download that PDF. It's also from here where they would be able to send a fax out. So they would enter in the phone number and then upload the attachment, whether it's PDF or JPEG, to then send that outgoing fax. So this feature is great if you're looking at replacing a traditional analog fax machine. And as well as, you know, if you're paying for a monthly e-fax service that you want to get rid of, then you can use this feature as well. Besides the fax monitoring option, we also can deliver the faxes by email. So we would just input the email address within here, and then that individual or individuals would receive the fax as a PDF attachment. So very similar to the voicemail to email notification. There is also the option to relate to a fax machine. So we could interface with a traditional fax machine. However, it would require an added hardware component. So we would need to have an FXS gateway in place. So we do have one available, or we can work with a third-party ATA device to support that. But it's just an added cost to that would need to be considered. Typically, if they're not looking at replacing the fax machine, it's already linked up to the PSTN trunks, then we typically recommend just to leave it segregated from the phone system entirely. So again, if they're looking at replacing it, then our built-in fax feature is something that would be ideal. Now, as I was mentioning about FXS gateways, so we do have gateways available. So there's FXO gateways that we have, FXS gateways, as well as a PRI gateway, whether it's a single PRI or a dual PRI port. So these devices, if required, can be centrally managed by the main or core FortiVoice system. So that would all be done here under the Manage System section, which makes it easy, basically a single pane of glass. Moving on to the trunks. So typically we're encountering a lot of customers that are moving over to SIP trunks, more cost effective. Configuration of the SIP trunks is straightforward, whether you're using a third-party SIP provider or using our FortiCall SIP service. So we do have that as an option as well. It really is a matter of just configuring the SIP information, the account credentials and any other pertinent areas within here, so that in the end, once that's populated, then we're looking for that vendor, SIP vendor, to go into service. Once it's in service, then we can configure our inbound and outbound dial plan rules. So for inbound rules, we would choose the trunk profile, and then down below configure the call handling, typically where the action type is set for an endpoint action, where in this case here it's set to go to the auto attendant welcome greeting. But this is something that you can easily modify by choosing a different action in the drop-down list. So if you want a live person to answer the calls, then you have that flexibility. We also do support DID mapping as well. So we could set up a DID rule and then configure the number mapping as shown here to map a phone number to an extension. So this would bypass the general inbound dial plan rule that I was just showing. And if you have a high quantity number of DIDs, we can import that as a CSV file. For outbound rules, it would be a matter of specifying the number pattern. So whether you're using a prefix today or no prefix, we can basically mirror that, specify that number pattern, and then the last step would be to configure the call handling, where we would specify the scheduling and the trunk profile. Other features that are also available are office peers. So the office peer feature is something, if we were looking at a FortiVoice distributed deployment where different locations have a FortiVoice system, we can link those systems together with an office peer profile. So the office peer basically is just a SIP trunk where we can link those devices to be able to then share directory listings of each of those sites and be able to support global extension dialing. This is something that is also used with other third-party PBX, especially if we've been selected and they're going through a slow migration. They obviously can't just simply rip and replace their existing solution with ours. So we, in numerous cases, have used the office peer to link up with Cisco or Avaya to support that slow migration until they've completely flipped over to a FortiVoice ecosystem. Next, I'm going to touch on utilities that are available with FortiVoice. So from a troubleshooting aspect, there is a built-in packet capture that could be utilized to troubleshoot a various range of issues, whether it's related to email notifications, audio issues between extensions or with the SIP provider, or registration issues. So it's just a matter of, you could focus on a specific extension or SIP trunk, for example, or you could just set the filter to capture everything. So in that case, you would not have anything selected here. You could just simply do a capture all and just hit on create to gather all of that network information, which would include the SIP packet information and RTP traffic information. So what happens then is once you're able to reproduce the issue, then this would produce a PCAP file, which then you can open up with third-party application like Wireshark to filter and determine where the issue may be stemming from. There's the built-in call history. So it's similar to what I was showing in the user portal, but this would be the global call history of all incoming, outgoing, and internal calls that are occurring on the system. You're able to also see calls that have been recorded. So if you were to click on any one of these, this actually will then bring up the recorded audio file. And similar to what I was showing earlier, you could double click on any one of these entries to gather call information, detail information, and the call flow. So you can download just this individual entry if need be. So this is something that could also be used as a troubleshooting tool. There's also logs that are available on the system logs, generic logs. So this is where you can filter and locate SMTP activity, such as like if the email notifications are not going out, you can run this. Then we also have additional logs related to voice and fax and like call queue as well. Under the storage is where you'll have access to the recorded calls. So if you double click on the folder, you'll then have visibility to all those recorded calls, which you can initiate a playback. You could also search for a specific call as well. There's also the call history, or sorry, the call reports that are also available. So those call reports is something that would have to be configured, predefined first. So there's various queries that you can generate, ones that are available. So you could actually initiate a extension report. So you could do a breakdown, a detailed report to see the breakdown of all the calls that certain extensions have made, which would contain like caller ID information, call duration information, or that could be just a summarized report to see the total number of calls that was made or received along with the call duration. There's reports based on a number search if you're trying to locate a specific caller ID or extension. You have a top 30 reports related to top 30 numbers dialed, top 30 longest calls. There's chunk reports that are available as well. So a multitude of built-in reports that are available. So these are not customizable. These are built in. If there was something that you're using or a customer was using today, like a third-party reporting application, we could tie into that via SMDR. So once you choose your query, the built-in query, then you would just choose your time period of when you want to extract the data. And then that can be emailed out up to 5 recipients in various formats, HTML, PDF, or just that CSV file. You can also schedule when you want to receive the reports, whether it's daily, specific weekdays, or specific calendar dates. Now, if the query exists, you can always generate that report on demand if that's something that you need to extract that data right away. From an admin standpoint, there are system alerts that can be delivered by email related to various categories. So one here, for example, if you want to keep track of trunk connectivity, whether it's the SIP trunks or maybe related to the gateways, for example, that's something that you could be alerted of by email. Updates to the system, again, would fall under the Manage System selection. So you have two tabs here for the FortiPhone and for the FortiVoice itself. So for the updates to the physical handsets, you would just simply upload the firmware image, which you can download that from the Fortinet support portal. So once that's in place, then you would specify the upgrade schedule and then set your action on when you want to schedule the upgrade. And with the upgrades on the handsets, this is done in bulks of 10 at a time. For FortiVoice updates, again, it would just be a matter of retrieving the firmware image from the Fortinet support portal, uploading that in here, and then you can either choose to upgrade right away or set a custom upgrade schedule. There is also a security section that is available with the release of 6.0. So there's the intrusion detection feature, which you can enable. This basically lets you manually add IP addresses to be exempted from being blocked or removed. System added the exempt IPs if you find them suspicious. Like I said, you can configure the parameters here. So you can either disable it to just stop the intrusion detection activities. It could be, based on just tracking the intrusion detection activities, or you could choose to enable to activate intrusion detection activities. So we can track it in various methods here. Also, under the security, you have a password policy that you could also implement to add that additional security measure. There's also the ability to globally block phone numbers as well. So that's available. And that concludes the technical overview of the FortiVoice solution. For further information, you can always access our docs.fortinet.com website. We do have a FortiVoice section here where you'll have access to not only the admin guide, but access to the cookbook, tech notes, other guides that are also available from within here. So the cookbook section is a great one here, outlining certain features which can be very, very useful. For example, for the soft clients, outlining best practices, the configuration of the soft clients, as well as configuration of the FortiGates. Thank you for listening, and if there's any questions, please reach out to your local representative. Thank you.